They placed a document in front of me. "It's just a formality, Mom," they said. I trusted them. I signed, but not before writing something they never expected. I don't know if it was intuition or just experience, but while my children spoke quickly, like they were in a rush, like my questions were an inconvenience, something inside me lit up. A small alarm that said, "Take a good look. Don't rush." It had all started a few weeks earlier when I fell in the bathroom at 3 a.m. It wasn't serious, just a fright and a bruise on my arm. But that fall became the perfect excuse for them, my children, to decide it was time to get things in order. "We have to plan for the future, Mom," said Andrew, the oldest. "You can't live alone anymore, and all that paperwork might get complicated later." They said it with kindness, with that sugar-coated voice people use when they don't want you to argue. I nodded. I thought they were worried about me. I felt cared for. A few days later, they brought me several documents. They said it was to make things easier, handling the house, the car, the pension. "So you don't have to worry, Mom," they insisted. I looked at them one by one, polite, attentive, composed, but there was urgency in their eyes, as if something didn't add up. I asked them to let me read things carefully. They glanced at each other. I saw Andrew purse his lips. Emily, my youngest, rolled her eyes, though she tried to hide it. "Mom, it's just technical stuff. Nobody understands that anyway," she said with a nervous laugh. "Just trust us." Trust us. What a dangerous phrase when it comes without clear answers. That night, I couldn't sleep. They had left the papers on my table so I could sign them at ease the next day. I got up at midnight, turned on the lamp, and read them. Every page, with my glasses firmly on and my heart racing. And then I saw it. Hidden among clauses and legal jargon, one document stripped me of the rights to my own home. It turned me literally into a guest with permission. One signature and they would own everything. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't confront them. I just thought. I remembered the times they left me waiting on a Sunday, the calls they never returned, the decisions made without asking me, the way they treated me like a burden. And I never said a word, but this time would be different. I took a blank sheet of paper. I rewrote one of the clauses. In clear, firm handwriting, I added a condition, small but powerful, a line that seemed harmless but changed everything, something they wouldn't notice because they never expected me to read, to understand. The next day, when they came over, I pretended to be calm. I served them coffee, listened to them talk about lawyers, about plans, about how much they were helping me. Then I signed. I handed them the envelope and thanked them with a smile. They said nothing more, gathered their things and left, satisfied. But they had no idea that hidden in that paper was a bomb, a handwritten bomb from a mother who, this time, was done staying silent. Days went by without any news. My children didn't mention a thing. They didn't call more often. They didn't act any different. They went on with their lives as if I had done exactly what they expected: sign, surrender, vanish from the map. I didn't say anything either. I simply observed. It was hard to admit, but deep down, I wasn't surprised. Maybe I had always known that the affection they showed had boundaries, that I had stopped being a priority, that they no longer saw me as their mother, but as unfinished business. One morning, Emily called. She was polite, as always, but something in her tone had changed. "Mom, everything's ready for the transfer. The lawyer said a copy should arrive in a few days, just for your records." "Oh, really? That's great," I said, hiding the irony in my voice. "And, well, there's something else we wanted to talk to you about," she added, lowering her voice. "Andrew and I were thinking, maybe you should come live with one of us." There it was, the full package. Take the house, then offer me a corner in theirs, like a potted plant being relocated. And which one of you would be the lucky host? Well, actually, we thought you could rotate. A few months with him, a few with me. That way, it's not too much for either of us. Too much. Like I was a weight. Like my presence was something to endure. I'll think about it, I replied in a neutral tone. Thanks. For the concern. I hung up. I stared at the phone. My hand was shaking, not from sadness, but from a fury I'd kept inside for too long. Not because of the plan itself, but because of the way they disguised it as a noble gesture, as if I couldn't see through it. That same afternoon, I took out the notebook where I always write the things I don't dare say out loud. I poured everything onto those pages, every suspicion, every unsaid word, every wound collected over the years. They think they've won, that they convinced me, but they didn't see what I wrote. They don't know I left a door open, just for me. The clause I changed was legal and binding. It was well written. A close friend of my late husband, who had been a notary, once taught me how to read contracts carefully. I remembered that just in time. I added a condition. Any changes to the property had to be notified and approved by me, in writing, every time. If I didn't agree with the intended use, the transaction would be null. I made it look like a mere formality, but it was a legal trap to protect myself. A few days later, Andrew came to see me. Mom, I wanted to talk to you about the house. We're thinking of making a few renovations, maybe even renting it out for a while you settle in at Emily's place. I looked him straight in the eye. Rent it out? Without asking me first? Well, technically, you don't need to worry about that anymore. You signed the transfer, remember? I smiled. And did you read what you signed? Silence. I suggest you check Clause 4, Section C, right before the closing line. His brow furrowed. He pulled out his phone and opened the digital file. His eyes moved quickly across the screen, but his expression started to shift. Cold, shocked, confused. What is this? That, dear, I said, is my way of saying I can still read, and I still know how to protect myself. But you can't just change a document like that without telling anyone. I didn't change it after. I wrote it before signing. You said you trusted me. I trusted my judgment. Andrew stood there, frozen. He didn't know whether to yell, laugh, or walk out. Mom, this complicates everything. It balances everything. That night, I slept peacefully. For the first time in years, I felt strong, not because I'd beaten them, but because I'd finally listened to myself, because I broke that old habit of pleasing out of fear. Andrew left without saying goodbye. He slammed the door, like the volume alone could give him back control. I remained seated in my chair, holding a cup of tea. I felt a strange calm. Not euphoria, not victory, just a new serenity, like I'd finally removed a heavy cloak that had weighed on my shoulders for years. I wasn't naive. I knew it wasn't over. I knew Andrew and Emily wouldn't let it go, that they'd look for another way in, some crack, some loophole, another attempt. And I didn't care. That day, I didn't cook for anyone. I didn't sweep the floors. I didn't answer my phone. I sat in the garden and watched the plants like I used to when I was young. I thought of my mother, who always used to say, "A woman is defined by what she keeps silent, but she is freed by what she dares to say." That night, Emily called. "Mom, what did you do?" Her voice was different now. No more sweetness, no disguises. It was sharp, almost angry. "What do you mean?" Andrew told me. The clause. Why did you do that without talking to us? And why did you both decide to transfer everything without really talking to me? Silence. We just wanted to help, she mumbled at last. Number you wanted control. And the worst part is, you assumed I wouldn't notice. That's not true. It is, Emily, it is. And it doesn't hurt that you tried. It hurts that you, my own children, assumed your mother was some foolish woman, easy to trick. She sighed on the other end. I could picture her sitting there, nervous, her leg bouncing, her brow tense. It wasn't out of malice. It was out of convenience, out of selfishness, out of that habit you've developed, treating me as if I no longer have a voice. The call ended without resolution. But something had shifted. For the first time, I had said everything without softening the edges, without coating my words to make them easier to swallow. And that was freedom. The next day, I decided to go out. I walked to the neighborhood library, slow but steady. I greeted old acquaintances. No one knew, but I felt like a new version of myself was walking those streets. Inside the library, I found a book about older women who had rewritten their destinies after the age of 70. Real stories, inspiring ones. I sat down and read voraciously. One woman wrote, "It wasn't the world that turned its back on me. It was me who stopped turning to face it." I went home with that thought tucked in my chest. I made myself a bowl of soup and sat at the table, alone. But inside, I felt more accompanied than ever. As I ate, the doorbell rang. It was my granddaughter Sophie, Emily's daughter. Her eyes looked sad. "Grandma, can I stay with you for a while?" I nodded. She walked in without another word, sat beside me, and after a long silence, she said, "Mom's furious. She says she doesn't understand why you did what you did." "And you?" I asked, looking at her gently. "I do understand." "Really?" "Yes. Because I've seen it, Grandma. I saw how you dimmed yourself, how you did everything for them and they barely looked at you. I used to think that was normal, but now I know it wasn't." I was moved. She took my hand. "I don't want to be like them, Grandma. I want you to teach me how to be different." And that's when I knew. Even if my children never changed, the next generation could still see, could still understand. That night, I wrote a new line in my notebook. "I don't fight for revenge. I fight so that someday someone will say, 'She taught me not to stay silent.'" Sophie's visit left a warm feeling in my chest. Knowing that she had seen what others refused to see reassured me that not all was lost, that even in the middle of selfishness, the seed of awareness could still bloom. But the peace didn't last long. 2 days later, Andrew came to see me again. He wasn't alone this time. A young man stood beside him, well-dressed, carrying a leather briefcase and with a face that gave me no comfort. "Mom, this is Mr. Galvin, our lawyer," Andrew said without hesitation. "We'd like to go over a few details in the document you signed." The lawyer greeted me with a tight smile. I invited them in. We sat in the living room, me with my notebook in hand, them with folders and legal pads. "Ma'am," the lawyer began, "there's a particular clause that stood out to us. This final section, Section C, it wasn't part of the original draft." "That's correct," I replied. "I wrote it in by hand." "Without the consent of the other parties?" "With my own consent." "Which," I said, looking him straight in the eye, "is the only one that matters. Because without my signature, none of this would be valid." Andrew shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Mom, this could lead to legal problems. You did this without legal advice, without even notifying us." And did you advise me when you wrote up a document that turned me into a guest in my own home? The lawyer tried to interrupt, but I stopped him with a calm but firm gesture. Mr. Galvin, I don't need an explanation. What I did was entirely legal, and I can prove it. I have a copy of the signed document. I have witnesses who saw me sign it willingly, with full awareness. I even have evidence that I was pressured to sign quickly, without reading. Andrew stared at me, furious. That's when Emily walked in, as if she'd been waiting outside the entire time. Her face was cold, frozen. What are you trying to do, Mom? Divide us, manipulate us with this performance. I stood up. I looked at her with a calm that shook her. I'm not trying to divide you. You already divided yourselves the moment you decided to cut me out of the decisions. What I'm doing now is setting boundaries. You're our mother. You should trust us. And you should have behaved like my children. Instead, you treated me like a useful signature, nothing more. Emily opened her mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come out. Maybe because deep down, she knew everything I was saying was true. I want you to leave, I told them, still calm. Today is not a day for lawyers or accusations. Today is a day for me to finally breathe in peace. The lawyer packed up his things in silence. Andrew muttered something I didn't catch. Emily walked out without looking back. I closed the door firmly, not in anger, in dignity. I went to the kitchen, boiled some water, and made myself a cup of tea. Then I sat by the window with my notebook in my lap and wrote, "This isn't about winning a battle. It's about reclaiming my place, my name, my will." That evening, Sophie returned with a small surprise. She brought a flower and a letter. The flower was from her garden. The letter, handwritten. "Grandma, I want to learn from you. Everything." It moved me. I made her some hot chocolate. And as we talked, I realized something had broken, but something new was also starting to grow. A truth, a bond, a new kind of inheritance. The next morning, I went out for an early walk. It was Saturday, and most of the neighborhood was still asleep. The air was crisp, and the sky had that clean, pale blue color that only appears when an important decision has already been made. I passed in front of Mrs. Lawson's bakery, a woman I'd barely exchanged words with in years. She saw me, raised her hand, and called out, "Ma'am, do you have a moment?" I stepped inside. The place smelled of fresh bread and roasted coffee. I sat down on one of the old wooden chairs by the counter. She poured me a cup without asking. "I heard," she began, "your children are saying things." Her voice was blunt. "That you betrayed them with a document. That you left them with nothing." I looked at her unsurprised. "Is that what they're saying?" "Yes. But I also know the other side, the real one. Because yours isn't the first story like this, and it won't be the last." She had eyes that had cried enough tears in life to stop crying altogether. She grabbed my hand with strength and said, "You should be proud. Not everyone has the courage to do what you did." We sat in silence for a moment. "Thank you," I whispered, feeling a knot in my throat. "We're organizing something," she said. "A group of older women, widows, divorcees, women forgotten by their families. We meet once a week, to talk, to share, to learn. Would you like to come?" I didn't know what to say. I'd never been one for groups or for opening up to strangers, but something in me said yes. "I'll go." That Thursday, I attended the meeting. There were about 12 of us. Some used canes, some had heavy eyes, but all of us carried stories that weighed more than they should. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it simple. I didn't name names. I didn't blame anyone. I just said, "One day I signed something. But before I did, I wrote what truly mattered. And because of that, I remembered who I am. The room fell quiet. Then one woman clapped, then another, and another. That's when I realized my story wasn't just mine. It belonged to many. That what I had lived could help others rise, draw their own lines in the sand, write their own section C in the story of their lives. I left that room with a feeling I hadn't known in years, like my steps were finally not going backward. That evening, Sophie surprised me again. She had drawn a cover for my notebook. With colored pencils, she wrote, "The woman who refused to be erased." I cried, not from sadness, from gratitude. "Do you like it, Grandma?" "More than you know, sweetheart. It's the cover of a new life." I hugged her, tightly, with hope. And I knew, even if my home still had cold corners, my heart was beginning to fill with light. Because now, I was no longer walking alone. Weeks passed in silence. Neither Emily nor Andrew called. They didn't visit. They didn't write. It was as if I had ceased to exist, but unlike other times, it didn't hurt. I felt light. I discovered what it truly means to be ignored by those who only know how to demand. I also discovered the kind of silence that heals. I kept attending the women's meetings. Every Thursday was a balm. We shared coffee, stories, notes, fears, and quiet courage. I learned that many of them had been through something similar. Some had given in. Others, like me, had stopped just in time. One of them told me something that stayed with me. Sometimes regaining respect starts with no longer begging for affection. That phrase became my mantra. The indifference of my children stopped hurting. Their absence stopped mattering. Because I finally understood. It wasn't me who had changed. It was my perspective, my place in the story. Then one day I received an official notice. Andrew and Emily were trying to rent out the house, despite everything. The document they submitted conveniently omitted the clause I had added. It was a desperate move, reckless, and completely illegal. I took a deep breath. I didn't let anger take over. I grabbed my folder with all the signed copies and went personally to the property registry office. The clerk listened carefully. He read my document. His brow furrowed. He asked me to wait. 15 minutes later, he returned with a look of both surprise and admiration. "You were right. This document is complete and registered. Any attempt to lease the property without your written consent is invalid." I nodded calmly. "Would you like to file a lawsuit?" I stood in silence for a moment. I thought of all the things I could do: confront, expose, take them to court. But then I shook my head. I just want them to know they tried, and they failed. I returned home with that decision made. That very night, I called Emily. "I know what you tried to do," I said plainly. "Mom, it's not what you think. I don't want explanations. I'm not looking for apologies. I'm just calling to tell you that I know, and that even knowing, I'm not going to hurt you." "Why?" "Because I'm not like you." Long silence. Heavy. "We thought you wouldn't notice," she finally said. "And that was their biggest mistake." I hung up gently, poured myself a glass of wine, sat in the garden, looked up at the stars the way I did when I was a child, and I felt whole, not because I had won, but because I had finally stopped losing myself. That night, I wrote in my notebook, "I don't need to punish. My greatest justice is to keep standing, without fear, without bitterness, and without surrender." I was sorting through an old box of photographs when I found the envelope. It was small, yellowed with age, and had my name written on it in the slanted handwriting of Julian, my husband. I didn't remember seeing it before. Maybe I had tucked it away among so many things after he passed, unaware of what it held. Or maybe it had waited until just the right moment to be found. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a brief letter, written in blue ink with so much love. My love, if you're reading this, it means time has moved forward. I'm no longer here, but you are, and that brings me peace. I know that one day, our children, whether out of love or fear, will try to take control of your life. That's how we were raised. They'll think protecting means deciding for someone else. But you're stronger than that. Don't let anyone silence your voice. Don't sign without reading. Don't leave without leaving a mark. I love you. Julian. I held the letter to my chest for a long time. I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath. It was as if he knew, as if even from the distance of time he was still protecting me. His voice returned, not to make choices for me, but to remind me that I had always known what to do, that I only needed to trust my instinct. I cried, but not from pain. I cried because I felt accompanied, even through memory, because that letter was a silent answer to my present. I went to the kitchen, made myself a cup of tea, and sat down to write in my notebook. Memory, too, is a form of companionship. Julian spoke to me when I needed him most, and I listened. I tucked the letter between the pages of my notebook, right next to the line I had written about not giving in. Now the two were together, resolve and love. That night I dreamed of him. We were in the old country house, where the children once played, and we drank mate beneath the lemon tree. He looked at me and laughed. "You always knew," he said. "You just needed to hear yourself." I woke up with my heart at peace. The next day at the women's meeting, I shared what I had found. I read the letter aloud. Some cried with me, others hugged me in silence. One of them, her name was Helen, told me, "You're teaching us that it's never too late to wake up, not even after years of silence." And in that moment, I knew for certain I wasn't alone anymore, not even when no one was speaking to me. I was surrounded by an invisible network of brave women, of loving memories, of gathered strength. And every step I took was no longer just mine. The days that followed were calm. After finding Julian's letter, after sharing it with the women, something inside me shifted. I didn't feel changed. I felt reclaimed. As if a part of me that had been sleeping for years was now walking beside me, through the house, through the streets, through life. One soft rainy afternoon, the doorbell rang. It was Emily. She wasn't holding suitcases or documents or anger, just a wet umbrella and a tired face. I hadn't seen her look like that since she was a teenage girl, bursting with emotions she didn't know how to name. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded. She sat on the sofa across from me. She didn't hug me, she didn't cry, but her eyes spoke a language I recognized, the language of fear and shame. "I'm not here to argue," she said. "I just wanted to see you." "I'm here," I replied. "Who do you see?" Silence. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She handed it to me. "It's a copy of the document, the one you signed, with your clause highlighted. I've read it. I understand it now, and I accept it." I read the page without a word. The printed lines, the underlined section, the pencil marks. She had tried to understand. That alone was something. A small gesture, but a real one. "That's not really why I came," she added. "I came because Sophie won't stop talking about you, about what you're teaching her, about how you write, about how you fought without raising your voice." Her voice cracked. And then, carefully, she added, "And I thought maybe, if you'll let me." I'd like to listen too, to learn from you, even if it's late." I took a deep breath. I didn't know if it was sincere. I didn't know if it was a step or an emotional trap. But I no longer needed absolute certainty to act. I only needed to stay true to myself. "We can start with a cup of coffee," I said, "and see where it goes from there." She smiled. For the first time in a long time, it was a clean smile. No defenses. We made the coffee together like we used to. We didn't talk about the past or the document or inheritance. We talked about the present, about how plants grow when they're watered without hurry, about how rain can be beautiful when you're no longer afraid of getting wet. Before leaving, she looked at me with a mix of nostalgia and newfound respect. "I'm sorry, Mom, not just for what I did, but for what I didn't see." "Sometimes," I said, "not seeing clearly is a form of abandonment." "I know," she whispered. "That's why I want to stay a little longer, if you'll have me." "I will," I said, "but I won't lose myself again just so others can find themselves." She nodded. She hugged me, and this time, the hug didn't hurt. That night, I wrote in my notebook, "Forgiveness isn't returning to the beginning. It's tracing a new path, where the rules are no longer broken in silence." Sophie came over on a Saturday afternoon, carrying her sketchbook under one arm and a backpack full of colored pencils, markers, and questions. "Will you tell me a story today too?" she asked with a grin. "Today," I said, "you're going to write your own. But first, I want to show you something." I led her to the cabinet in the dining room where I kept my oldest keepsakes. From one of the drawers, I pulled out a small dark wooden box that had remained shut for years. Inside were the first letters I wrote as a young woman, the house deeds, photos of Julian, and the very first notebook where I started writing the things I didn't dare say aloud. I showed it to her. This was my first notebook. In here, I wrote what I couldn't speak, what hurt, what I dreamed. No one ever read it, but it saved me more times than I can count. Sophie ran her fingers gently over the cover. "Can I read it?" "Not yet. First, I want you to start yours. I want you to write your story, your thoughts, even the things you don't understand yet." She nodded, excited. She opened her brand new notebook and in large letters wrote, "My grandmother taught me never to stay silent." I felt tears well up. We sat together at the table, facing each other, writing in silence for a while. Then I told her things I had never shared before, about my childhood, my fears when I got married, what it was like raising Emily and Andrew with no manual, no rest, and often no help. I told her about the day I signed that paper, and how my gut screamed that something wasn't right. "Why didn't you say no?" she asked. "Because women of my generation were taught that saying no was selfish, that giving in was a form of love. But now I understand. Protecting yourself is also love." "And now, would you be able to say no?" "Now," I said, "not only do I know how, I already have." She smiled, wrapped her arms around my neck. "When I grow up, I want to be like you." "No, my love. I want you to be better. I want you never to have to wait 74 years to hear your own voice." Later, she helped me water the plants. In a new pot, we planted a jasmine together. "This one we'll take care of together," she said. "Yes. And when it blooms, it'll be our sign that everything planted with love eventually bears fruit." That night, before bed, I read Julian's letter one more time. Then I wrote in my notebook, "Today, I pass the torch to Sophie. Not of fire, but of voice. Let it carry her where I couldn't go. Let her never sign what she doesn't understand. Let her never silence what wounds her. And let her always know she was worth it. The next morning I woke up before dawn. I opened the window. The air was cold, but not sharp. It was a clean kind of cold, the kind that makes you breathe deep and feel alive. I wrapped myself in my favorite shawl, the one my mother knit for me so many years ago. I brewed a strong coffee and went out to sit in the garden. And there it was. The jasmine Sophie and I had planted, its first small white bloom peeking shyly through the green. I smiled. It wasn't just a flower, it was a promise. Since that day, the day I signed that paper with my own hidden clause, many things have changed. Emily now calls me every week. Sometimes she comes for coffee. Sometimes she just listens. We still haven't spoken about everything, but the silence between us no longer hurts. It's a silence filled with intention. Andrew, well, he hasn't come back yet. I understand. Some children need more time to face their own reflection. But I hold no grudge. Because for the first time in my life, I know that forgiveness isn't about others. It's about oneself. The house is still mine, not because of the papers, but because this is where my story lives. My steps, my scars, my books with lines marked that once saved me. My plants, which kept growing even when I forgot to water them. Sophie comes every Sunday. She reads me what she writes. Sometimes it's sad stories, sometimes clumsy but sweet poems, and with every word she shares, I remember this was all worth it. One day she told me, "Grandma, when I grow up, I won't let anyone make me feel small." And I knew my work was done. I don't need applause. I don't need recognition. Just the quiet peace of a soul that knows it didn't betray itself at the end of the road. Today, I wrote the final page of my notebook. They tricked me into signing, but I was the one who wrote the ending. Not with hate, not with vengeance, but with memory, with courage, with love for myself. I closed the notebook, tucked it back into the same wooden box where Julian's letter now rests. And as the sun rose slowly outside my window, I understood this story was never just mine. It belongs to every woman who ever believed that staying silent was love. To every mother who gave everything and received so little. To every grandmother who, even in silence, still knows how to teach resilience and how to bloom. Because this time, the one who signed was me. And this time, what I wrote changed everything.